trillions of dollars are going to enter the Bitcoin market in the coming years. In this episode of the Blockware podcast, I interview executives from two of the top firms in the Bitcoin mining space, and we find out how they're preparing for this trillion-dollar tsunami. I'm joined by Chief Revenue Officer at Blockware and recurring guest of the Blockware podcast, Danny Condon. I'm also joined by John Belazaire, the Chief Executive Officer at Soluna. Soluna owns and operates multiple data centers across the United States, and they are one of the top infrastructure and operators in the Bitcoin mining world. Danny and John provide very unique perspectives into Bitcoin mining, and how they're preparing for this bull market. We dive deep into the institutionalization of Bitcoin and how the entire industry is hyper specializing. This episode was recorded on Wednesday, May 28th, the Bitcoin Conference 2025 in Las Vegas, at a Bitcoin price of $108,000. Without further ado, here's the episode. Enjoy.
Hello, everyone. I'm here with John Belazaire from Soluna and Danny Condon from Blockware. We're at Bitcoin Vegas 2025, and Blockware and Soluna just announced a major partnership. So, John, why don't you start and tell us a little bit about your company, and then we can dive into this partnership.
Absolutely. So, Soluna is in the business of providing Bitcoin hosting services to what we call hyperscale miners, companies that are in the business of providing mining services for themselves or to a larger community, hence the relationship with Blockware. And what makes us unique is that all of our facilities are co-located with renewable energy power plants that otherwise would have wasted energy. We build data centers there, build up infrastructure, and consume that wasted energy and converts it into incremental revenue for those power plants. Over the years, we've become very good at doing this, and this has created a great platform for us to provide services to companies like Blockware.
Amazing. Danny, why don't you give us a little more information about Blockware?
Yeah, absolutely. So Blockware is a Bitcoin mining as a service company, and what that means is that we make Bitcoin mining accessible to everyone. So for anybody who wants to mine Bitcoin without all the headache, which we can unpack here about, building a data center, quitting your day job, operating this, but simply to get access to the opportunity that is Bitcoin mining and to continuously, effectively dollar cost average Bitcoin, we make that possible.
Yes, sir. Now, John, one of the challenges with mining using renewable energy, the sun's not shining or the wind isn't blowing, you got a big problem there, right? And miners, they love uptime. They want to be mining as much Bitcoin as possible. But there's something interesting about your facility that kind of mitigates that challenge. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, we often get that question. The wind doesn't blow all the time. The sun doesn't shine all the time. How do you provide, the uptime that you need for your computing? In fact, we get that from the power plant owners themselves. Like, what are you guys doing back there and how is that going to work? And for the past 8 years, we've been perfecting a solution to that. And the way we do it is we build the site behind the meter, which means it's co-located with the power plant behind the main meter that records the power that's going to the grid. Well, for the power to get to the grid, there's a substation there, and we interconnect into that same substation, which now gives us access to 3 sources of energy. The first is the curtailed power, so that's the power that would otherwise go wasted. If you're driving past a renewable energy power plant, the easiest one to see is wind turbines. You're driving in West Texas, and you'll see this huge farm. Half of the turbines are on and spinning, and half seem to be broken. They're actually not broken. They're turned off because the grid says only send us half your power to tomorrow or a third of your power. And what we do is connect our facility to that power plant and tie into that substation. And now we can draw power from that power plant and also the grid. And because we're doing those two things, the power plant and the data center basically become a combined resource, is the way to think about it. So from the grid's perspective, that location now is either a generator of energy or a load. And so, as I was saying earlier, so we have now the ability to draw power from 3 locations. One is that wasted energy, so curtailed power. The second is when the wind or solar plant is bigger than the data center, we will draw power from that facility. So we'll subtract energy from it. That's called subtractive energy. and we draw that resource. And then when the wind or solar is smaller than the data center, not producing enough to meet all of our requirements, then we can actually draw from the grid. And between those three sources, we get all of the power we need. On average, our data centers are up 97% of the time.
Wow, that's really impressive. And for the audience to fully understand this, your data center consumes less power on average than what the solar farm, or the wind farm rather, is capable of producing?
That's right. So we design our facility. We typically will build the data center so it's about 2/3 the size of the full production capacity or capability, what's called the nameplate capacity of the plant.
Mm-hmm.
And what that allows us to do is fit under the curve, if you can see my hands on video, under the power curve that gets created by that plant. And each plant has its own signature. And we collect about 4 years of information about each plant. And then we do that analysis. And then we do something called a curtailment assessment, where we analyze for the power plant company. If we had a data center here, this is how much wasted energy you would eliminate by having this facility here. And we can prove to you that we can do that by showing you our consumption under that curve. And because we do that, we can design the facility to produce whatever uptime we want. It's a flexible load, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so we design our software now called Maestro OS that allows us to source power from those three locations at any given time in a fixed interval over the full year. And that's how you get your 97% uptime.
It's kind of a quintessential story of Bitcoin mining. If you have a giant wind farm, you're producing a lot of power for most of the time, but it's out in the middle of nowhere. It's in a very rural location. So if you're the power plant, if you're running this wind farm, you need a customer you can sell that energy to.
Right.
But the Bitcoin miners, they come in, they can buy as much power as they want, and they can turn off any single time. And so no other energy consumer fits that profile.
It's like a time and location independent energy buyer of last resort, which is a bit of a word salad, but I think it's the best way to describe it. It's a complete handshake with energy generation assets, and it provides a catalyst to build these assets, which otherwise, why are you going to build something if nobody's going to buy your product? If you have somebody who's going to buy your product and actually co-locate with you, it's a perfect marriage.
Right.
Indeed. Yeah. And our mission is to drive more renewable development and construction around the world. And we believe Bitcoin is one of the most powerful catalysts, computing that you can put to sleep, that's batchable, that can be done anywhere in the world. And it is the buyer of last resorts, right?
Mm-hmm.
At any price, we can draw the energy. And what's most important is that it's a perfect load in the sense that when the power is available, it will consume it. When it's not available, it can disappear from the network.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very powerful characteristic that's been really hard to produce with batteries. And in the past, you used to build these very large aluminum smelters that would, draw all of this energy. We don't really go in for those types of things anymore. And so computing is a perfect distributed solution to the problem.
One of the things that I think may help the audience kind of contextualize and understand what's going on better is like, I have no background in energy. So a lot of the stuff you're saying to me is to many of the audience as well, it's probably pretty foreign, right? And I think the Bitcoin mining industry, it requires specialization, right? So your focus seems to be on the energy infrastructure and the operations. And as a Bitcoiner, that's not my area of expertise. I know Bitcoin. And so if I want exposure to Bitcoin mining, it's pretty difficult to go out and build my own data center and understand, what's a good power source? How can we mitigate a lot of these challenges? And so I think where this partnership has a lot of room to shine is, you're hyper-focused on the energy infrastructure and the operations. And then Blockware, we're enabling people to be hyper-focused on the top layer, which is the compute, the Bitcoin mining. So Danny, can you kind of elaborate on that?
Yeah. I think maybe to set some context and put a bit of a frame around it, think about this kind of like, layer cake or this stack. So at the base level, you have land and power, right? And then you have infrastructure that's built on that land and effectively consuming that power. Then you have, operations, and then you have the compute layer. And there's a lot of optionality on the compute layer, but let's just focus on, the Bitcoin mining aspect of that. So that's the whole cake, right? And then you can kind of decide, like, do I want to do everything, or do I want to specialize and, be exceptional in one or two of those areas? And from Blockware's perspective, our focus is on effectively selling that compute layer, enabling anybody who wants access to Bitcoin mining that doesn't want to worry about any of that whole layer cake that's quite complex actually and
Right.
simple, but certainly not easy.
Mhm.
So we focus on the service layer, and by effectively selling ASICs to individual and institutional capital allocators that want access to that Bitcoin mining opportunity. And our focus is really to partner with the best operators, right? Rather than trying to be pretty damn good at everything, we want to be the best at what we're the best at.
Mhm.
And so what we're really excited about this partnership with Soluna is this is a 1 + 1 = 3 kind of strategy, right? We don't have to worry about cutting land deals, co-locating with renewable power generation assets, building out the infrastructure responsible for that CapEx, so on and so forth. We're focused on placing machines at your facility and enabling folks who want to mine Bitcoin in a capital efficient capacity with the opportunity to do so.
And you guys, however, are kind of focused on the bottom part of the stack, which is the infrastructure and the operations. So can you discuss that a little bit?
Yeah, our focus is really providing a scalable platform. So we are focused on developing gigawatts of energy, acres of land that we can then turn into really two products. The first is solving the renewable energy power plant's problem, a curtailment mitigation solution. And the data center project does that. And then the second product is creating call it a high-end, high-quality service platform for providing infrastructure for large mining companies. And, the Blockware model, which is to essentially democratize the access to mining infrastructure and compute to get exposure to mining without the complexity. We are focused on taking care of all of that complexity and making it a very simple platform that can be accessible to these large miners.
That makes sense. It's kind of comes full circle because the Bitcoin mining industry used to be pretty simple, do a little bit of rewiring in your house, plug in a miner in your garage, and you're hashing, you're making some Bitcoin. But over the years, the halvings happened, mining difficulties risen, it's gotten a lot more competitive.
Mhm.
And so now you have everything you're doing kind of behind the scenes almost, cutting these land deals or power deals, getting all the infrastructure in play. But then Blockware does make it simple for the end user. The end product is simple because you can just go on the marketplace, find a miner, buy a machine, you're hashing immediately. It's even more simple than it was originally.
Yeah, if you want to start mining Bitcoin today, you can do that, right? And what happens in the background with this, and I think this is an interesting, we use this analogy of time and location, independent energy buyer of last resort. It's kind of like this chicken and the egg, or Field of Dreams maybe is a better analogy. If you build it, they will come, right? But it's kind of the reverse of that where, to use the analogy here where we are your time and location or infrastructure buyer of last resort, right? So this enables us, Blockware, to focus on scaling our business, and it increases the velocity in which we can scale, because I know that Soluna's out there blocking and tackling, literally moving earth, building things. I've spent some time at one of their facilities where we have a lot of rigs deployed, and you can focus on what you're best at, and then we make it exceptionally easy for really anyone to mine Bitcoin, which is, proven to be a pretty exceptional opportunity.
Yeah, I like your football analogy there. You guys are kind of like the offensive line. You're blocking and tackling.
Right.
And we're the quarterback. We're getting the ball.
Yep.
And we're throwing it to our client downfield, the receiver who
Yeah,
gets a touchdown.
exactly. There we go.
There you go.
And then you get to do a celly at the end too, which is always fun.
Exactly. Yeah, when Bitcoin hits 150K.
There you go.
That's right.
There you go.
That's right.
One of the hottest topics, you guys are publicly traded, obviously. And right now, kind of the big theme, I feel like, at this Bitcoin conference is public Bitcoin companies and their Bitcoin treasury strategy. So as a public company CEO, how have you thought of that, and what's your plan there?
So we haven't put out a specific strategy around Bitcoin. We've traditionally not hodled Bitcoin, primarily because we haven't been a miner per se. We have a small mining operation, and we've been a service company for the most part. But we've started to rethink that a bit. We're not ready to say anything specific yet, but there is this view that there's a direct correlation to the asset in providing these services, and does it make sense for us to hold some of that asset on our balance sheet as we get to a point where we're not deploying capital completely to development and construction,
Right.
and there's excess capital. What should we do with that excess capital? And every company should have some strategy around what their treasury looks like.
Mhm.
And there's maturing perspectives on that also being a diversified view, including assets like Bitcoin. And so that's something we've been mulling over as a management team and with our board.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think everybody, whether you're a public company CEO or just an individual at home, you're thinking about this Bitcoin thing keeps going up. What should my
what should we
strategy
do?
be?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Exactly.
You don't want to miss out on this. Danny, talk about how Blockware and the service we offer. I view it as a way for everybody to build their own personal Bitcoin strategy, their own Bitcoin treasury. So can you talk about that?
Yeah.
a
So,
little?
I mean, and maybe just to piggyback kind of on that, on the question you asked, John. So, if you think about, this is all just a disruptive technology adoption curve. And if you've seen this, in the internet or, cell phones or, any disruptive technology, it kind of hockey sticks, right? And if you think about the adoption, I like to think about it in kind of three different buckets. So you've got like retail adoption, you have corporate adoption, which is, what we're largely speaking about. Then you have nation state adoption. And as you go up that curve, the pockets are deeper as you go through that. So what we're seeing right now is, significant corporate adoption, right? I mean, it's a big buzz. We're seeing nation state adoption. A lot of, sovereign, domestic or sovereign funds are buying Bitcoin. What does that do? It makes the Bitcoin price go up,
Yeah.
right? And so as you think about that, like, Bitcoin mining is effectively dollar cost averaging, right? And what you're doing is you are constantly purchasing Bitcoin, if you will, at a significant discount to the spot price of Bitcoin. And I like to think about it as kind of like a velocity play, right? Because the profitability around Bitcoin mining is basically, Bitcoin price and difficulty, or how many other miners are competing for that finite amount of Bitcoin. Now, the factor here is at which velocity can those two vectors move? So Bitcoin price can move at a very, very high or fast velocity, right? You get a company that announces they're buying Bitcoin. You get the United States establishing a Bitcoin strategic reserve. Bitcoin price can move very quickly. On the other hand, difficulty or incremental hash rate coming onto the network, you have a lot of real world limitations. We're talking about what you guys do is like how long, it takes a lot of time to cut power deals, to build, infrastructure, to deploy ASICs. They're mostly born in Asia and they come off a conveyor belt. They've got to get on a truck, a plane, another truck, get deployed at a site. So the speed at which incremental hash rate can come onto the network is the velocity is much lower than the speed at which Bitcoin price can move. So when we're in these moments like we're in right now, where we're seeing significant price appreciation, what that does is it increases the profit margin for Bitcoin miners significantly. And when you're mining Bitcoin, again, you're creating Bitcoin at largely a material discount to the spot price of Bitcoin. It's about being positioned for that. Would you rather buy Bitcoin at $110,000 or make it at $50,000 per Bitcoin, right? And that's, effectively the opportunity that together we enable.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And
Yeah, to add to that, I think one thing I've noticed over the 8 years that we've been in the industry is that the industry is going through an adoption curve. It is maturing. In fact, when we first got into the business, everybody was doing the full stack, right? They were running around cutting PPAs and grabbing old warehouses and building their own mines, and then just explosively bad things happen over the years of learning that, man, this is really hard stuff to do.
Right.
And it's really hard to scale this. It's very capital intensive and so forth. And what you start to get is, as industries evolve, you get specialization. So you get people who are just focused on sourcing energy, building infrastructure, building the mining operations, and running and providing those services. And then the large players come in and aggregate that interest in that infrastructure. And then you have, it makes sense that the individual who used to go and try to do everything him or herself can now go to a Blockware and just say, I just want access to hash power. I've got capital to do that, and I can participate in this broader ecosystem with materially reduced risk, right? Mm-hmm. And by aggregating all of that, you get economies of scale, because now you can deploy that into these environments. We focus on helping companies, like Blockware and others, reduce their hash costs so that price per Bitcoin can go down over time, because we are focusing on getting the best power cost, optimizing on the CapEx, operational efficiencies, using software to manage the machines, looking at predictive maintenance and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And then as you go all the way up the curve, it's about asset allocation. So now you're thinking about, I want to get exposure to this new technology. We're normally putting our money in equities, cash, a host of different fund allocations, and there's this new digital asset I want exposure to. Maybe that should be part of my treasury strategy. Right. So I go to my treasury, my treasurer, and I say, how should we allocate parts of our balance sheet to this new asset? And now that opens up a whole ecosystem around that as well. And I think that maturity is going to continue over time. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what's exciting about this industry. Here we are at BTC 2025, and the types of industry when you go to the floor is completely different. You're seeing everything from the machines, infrastructure providers, service providers, hosting, services to allow people to get access to hash power. We now have hash rate forward selling. It's fascinating to see how much growth and maturity has happened in the industry. And I think there's a lot more to come.
Yeah, that's a very astute observation. I think it's fitting that is happening with Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is the best money humanity has ever seen. Mm-hmm. And that the primary beneficial secondary effect of money is that you can hyper-specialize, right? If you were in a barter economy, you're having to learn how to fish, how to build a house, how to do all these things. But when you have a money and you can put your value into that, bring it with you into the future across time and space, you can actually specialize on your craft. So I think it's very fitting that we're seeing that in the Bitcoin world right now.
Yeah. One other thing I thought about, and that is that for a larger percentage of the world to participate in exposure to Bitcoin, if you really think about it, you need this level of maturity to take place, even more than this, right? For someone to not have to think about how to get exposure to it, where they have to think about all of these challenges and how to secure it and so forth. They should be able to just wake up and just allocate some of their assets to this particular asset.
Right.
Presumably over time that would become, a much larger portion of their asset base. Mm-hmm. But it's going to be fascinating to see what happens over the next, decade or so, when this is essentially a ubiquitous technology. We don't really talk about the internet very much at all anymore.
No,
but it's everywhere. It's just life. It's just part of the,
Exactly. And think about, to continue running with this and talking about the maturation of this, from a Bitcoin mining perspective, not long ago, years, right? Not many years even. Like if you wanted to mine Bitcoin on your computer, or, then, cool, I'm going to put one in my garage. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to, and you're going to make a lot of mistakes along the way. Like everybody tries to do everything because it's like, that's what it is. But that specialization, now, if you want to mine Bitcoin, you can start doing that today.
Yeah.
And you're almost certainly never going to see these machines, not ever have to worry about, you're not going to unscrew anything or change a fan or so on and so forth. Right. And years ago, 3, 5, 7 years ago, like the only way to do this was to do it all, right? Mm-hmm. And this specialization, I mean, I truly believe that, as industries mature, as anything matures, specialization wins. Be the best at what you're the best at. Unless you're like Shohei, we're talking a lot of, sports analogies. Shohei Ohtani, like he's the only dude who can pitch and, hit a lot of home runs. Like not everybody's going to be Shohei Ohtani. Just like be really, really, really good at what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And in the collaboration of what we together bring to market, it's kind of the manifestation of specialization coming together that ultimately provides the end consumer, which are individuals, family offices, institutions, hedge funds, and so on and so forth, to get access to mine Bitcoin, which is an exceptionally complex process, actually, with a lot of stuff behind it, but in a very, very simple way, right?
Right. One of the things I think about a lot recently is investors, Wall Street, traditional finance, family office, hedge funds, they're big on diversification. Me as a hardcore Bitcoiner, I'm willing to go all in on, 100% Bitcoin and ASICs and take all of the ups and the downs. Obviously, Bitcoin's fairly cyclical and volatile, but traditional investors, they want diversified assets with directional exposure, right? And so they want to mine Bitcoin and have tremendous upside during the bull markets, or they want to own equity in a company like yours where it's directionally exposed to Bitcoin, but you have a lot more downside protection because you are, at the end of the day, an infrastructure operator. And so I think the maturation of the Bitcoin industry, where you're getting all these different types of players, that's ultimately what's going to be able to draw lots of capital into the industry.
100%. And there's trillions of dollars that hasn't even woken up to this industry. And once it does, it will have transformational changes, waves to this industry, because I think that my background is in software technology, and I've seen this in other industries where once things reach a level where they are mainstream, the amount of investment just accelerates, and that acceleration drives more maturity. It drives more efforts to improve things that were broken before. And all of a sudden, everybody's using the technology. That's why 6 billion people have a smartphone in their pocket and a neck that hurts for some reason because they're looking at it all the time. But the same is going to be true for Bitcoin. It has a host of different applications that have yet to find their home. But once it's ubiquitous, it will be a integral part of society. And we won't be talking about its rise and hopeful rise to being at the table, if you will, right?
Yeah, I mean, I remember, you probably don't remember this, actually, it's going to be a good analogy, is like, I remember when cell phones like came out, and actually we can go kind of 3 potentially like different experiences of, when cell phones came out, but it was like, somebody's got a cell phone, and it was like, wow, that thing's cool. And it's like, oh man, I want to get a cell phone. I'm thinking about these cell phone. And now, to your point, it's completely organic with the experience that we have in life. And that's exactly where Bitcoin is going, right? And then it's going to be boring. It's going to be so exciting that it's going to be boring, right?
I think about that all the time. This is you don't have like an internet conference, right? So we're at the Bitcoin conference.
Exactly.
This probably won't exist in 10 years. Or
that's right.
It'll
That's
look radically different.
That's right. What are we meeting about?
There was a conference about Bitcoin? Wait, you mean like the thing that we use every day that's completely integrated into our life?
Into our life. It
doesn't make any sense. But
I did walk through the city, I want to say like a year ago, and I saw a phone booth. And I was like, wow.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's incredible
how far we've come.
Yeah, how fast technology is adapting. And on the phone thing, I have vague memories of a time pre-iPhone, but within 10 years, you go from like, I know 1 or 2 guys with an iPhone to everyone has one. It's very important in your everyday life. You can almost not live without it. And for the audience, I think when they think of Bitcoin, especially newcomers, and they think of Bitcoin adoption, they think of, I can go to Whole Foods and I can buy something with Bitcoin, or anywhere I go, they're going to accept Bitcoin. But I think it looks a little different than that. I think it looks like it's in your portfolio. It's sneaking it, Bitcoin treasury company is sneaking its way in the S&P 500. Your Schwab or Fidelity advisor is saying, hey, a 5% Bitcoin position is prudent. And so for the audience, when you're thinking, man, nowhere accepts Bitcoin. What are they talking about? We're nowhere near like this Bitcoinized world. But they're not understanding is that you're talking about medium of exchange. We're talking about store of value.
Store of value, right.
You mentioned before, trillions of dollars, trillions with a T, is coming into Bitcoin over the next 5 to 10 years. And I wholeheartedly believe that, and we're definitely reaching the sort of exponential phase of the S curve in terms of Bitcoin as a store of value.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and think about, I think an easy debunk to that is, or to, the medium of exchange, so on and so forth, is like most assets that we agree have value, think like how, real estate, a car, whatever, like things that cost money that have value, you don't exchange, right? I'm not going into a bodega on the corner and like shaving off a piece of my house, right? But everybody generally in the world agrees that like that house has some value.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't need to be exchanged to be exceptionally valuable, right?
Right.
So I think like medium of exchange, I do think in enough time to the point of, maturation of solutions, like, it probably will come to come to be, but it's not a critical factor of adoption. It's going to be a much later stage. For now, it's like it's an asset that is increasing so much in buying power that like I don't want to use my Bitcoin.
Right.
I want to use dollars because that's not increasing in relative value.
Right.
I want to hold my Bitcoin. When Bitcoin's boring and it's $10 million, value, sure, I'll go into the bodega and I'll like look at my eyes and it'll be like, go, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's how this thing is going to evolve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Adoption tends to find its own way in technology. It's we think that a measure of adoption is this ubiquitous usage, because we think Bitcoin is a form of money. It is, but it's so much more than that. We've never seen a technology this powerful, this technology this secure, a technology that is independent of any sovereign nation, that can continue to evolve over time, has a very powerful community. I've never seen anything like this in any other technology realm. And so it's okay that it's starting with store value as its primary way to proliferate. And then eventually it'll find a stage 2 and a stage 3. It's just the way technology evolves. And you don't get to really choose or design that in, right? You don't know that putting apps on iPhones is what would drive that, or the fact that content became easy to send to those devices over time and made them more of a sticky tool, and they've now become just about the most powerful platform for any type of application. The true will be for Bitcoin. The same will be true for Bitcoin, where you're going to see a host of different applications that we really can't think of right now.
Yeah.
Once it becomes completely mainstream, people are going to be looking for other ways to put that store of value to work, and that's when it'll start to inject itself into these other places that we're hoping it will.
Like you don't know what you don't know. I think when Satoshi released Bitcoin, I don't think he foresaw people like you going to these wind farms and saying, "Hey, we'll buy all the energy, excess power you produce." Like
that's right.
There's so many things
every megawatt
it touches that we just don't understand. So
yeah.
I think you guys have any closing thoughts? We'll start with you, Danny. Bitcoin price action, whatever you want to take it.
Yeah, I mean, loaded question there to finish, but yeah, I mean, I think like just you look at momentum, right, and you can kind of apply that to really any context, but the momentum behind Bitcoin adoption is significant. Right. Now you turn on CNBC and it's like 25% of what they're talking about. That wasn't true a year ago, certainly not 2 years ago, so on and so forth. So like where this thing is going is exceptionally exciting. The best way to get exposure to that, in my opinion, is to accumulate this to dollar cost average, is to mine Bitcoin, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what we're laser focused on enabling for everybody. Right. And the best way is really just, kind of managing risk is basically what you got to do. And that's where we're focused. So we're focused on scaling, as quickly and responsibly as we can with the best partners who are focused on executing their lane exceptionally well. So if you want to get exposure to Bitcoin, mining's a great way to get it. Choose the right partner, know that we're doing that work for you, and stack some corn.
Couldn't have said it better myself. John,
how do you follow that one? Well, I would say that Bitcoin is a powerful technology. It is more than a technology. It's a phenomenon right now. And we're now seeing a maturity that definitely points to an increased velocity in the maturity of that technology, an increased velocity in the technology becoming ubiquitous. And I think that only points to things going in one direction, and that's up.
Thank you, everybody, for watching. I appreciate you guys joining me, and make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll talk soon.